I would say this was the most significant week in global trade policy since the founding of the World Trade Organization. The historic sell-off that we saw over the past week at the stock market was especially significant because many people saw it as completely self-inflicted. This was not the COVID crisis or a financial crisis like in 2008. This is something that was brought on by the Trump administration.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
So let's go back to April 2nd. There were days of uncertainty, a huge sell-off on Wall Street leading up to April 5th. That was the day that the across-the-board 10% tariff went into effect for every nation in the world. That tariff was in place for a few days up until April 9th, and that was the day the reciprocal tariffs, these higher individualized tariff rates, went into effect for many nations, almost 100 nations around the world. But it was really not very long-lived. Less than 24 hours from when those tariffs actually went into effect, Donald Trump unexpectedly announced he would pull back on many of those reciprocal tariffs.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
It's impossible to know, of course, what's in Donald Trump's head when he makes a decision like this, but there have been some public indications of what brought him to this decision. One is the financial indicators. We saw, of course, the stock market taking a dive over the past few weeks, but there were also a lot of concerns coming out of the bond market and with treasuries that Trump has cited. He talked publicly about having seen Jamie Dimon doing an interview with Maria Bartiromo on television.
Do you personally expect a recession?
I am going to defer to my economists at this point, but I think probably that's a likely outcome.
Republican lawmakers have really been walking a tightrope in recent days. Many of them, especially in the Senate, are no fan of tariffs. At the hearing with USTR Jamison Greer this week, some of those concerns were really mounting before the about-face happened on tariffs.
Whose throat do I get to choke if this proves to be wrong?
Well, Senator, you can certainly always talk to me.
A few senators told me that the news broke while they were all having their caucus luncheon. A bunch of the senators, much of the GOP conference was in the same room when they all got the flash across their phones that, okay, we're going to reduce some of these tariffs temporarily. It was very clear that the reaction was one of pleasant surprise.
We've been overwhelmed with the response to come to D.C. and negotiate.
You had some conflicting messages coming out of the administration. Some of the people like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying, well, this could be a negotiation. We could see some of these reciprocal tariff rates come down. Then you had Trade and Manufacturing Advisor Peter Navarro writing an op-ed saying very directly, this is not a negotiation. And so the markets, foreign governments, and lawmakers here in Washington were really puzzled for many, many days about where we were actually going with this tariff plan. So it appears in the last few days that the administration has empowered Scott Bessent to be in more of a leadership role on many of these talks. He was the one who came out and briefed the press along with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt after this big about-face on tariffs.
Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved.
He has not been the face of the trade portfolio for most of the administration. That's been left up mostly to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and behind the scenes, Jamison Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, and Peter Navarro, the Trade and Manufacturing Advisor. And I think the shift that you see with putting Bessent more out in front on this is reflective of the White House wanting to, first of all, calm the markets. He's seen as more of a steady hand and as a Wall Street veteran himself, and also a kind of relegating the more protectionist advisors, people like Navarro and Lutnick, maybe to the sidelines a little bit. In the end, I think cooler heads prevailed to a certain extent, but we should remember that a 10% across-the-board tariff and a 145% tariff on China is still a monumentous shift in U.S. trade policy. We are still at higher tariff levels than we have seen for the last century.
How close are you to the first country coming to actually make a deal with the United States over tariffs? Is it days, months?
Well, I think it's very close, but we have to have a deal that we like. We don't want a deal that's going to be a bad deal, or I could make every deal in one day if I wanted to.
Looking forward, we have a lot of uncertainty. There are 75 plus nations, plus the European Union, who are trying to strike deals with the president over the course of only 90 days. And I think, we're going to see a lot of uncertainty leading up to that July deadline that they've imposed this week. there's a lot of ifs in this conversation because we simply do not know a lot, and I think that the Trump administration is just figuring it out themselves. I mean, the day after the about face on tariffs, Trump held a big cabinet meeting. Typically, a free trade agreement takes months if not years to negotiate, and now we're going to speed run all of this in 90 days. It's going to be messy, and it's going to be very difficult to discern what's going on behind the scenes. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet.